All right. Hello, everyone, and welcome to a replay of the NINC talk that I think was very successful at NINC. We had people talking to us all after and before the talk, but we really were very, very overwhelmed with the response that we got at NINC, and we hope that this presentation codifies some things for you. It should bring you up to date with most of the main findings that we've made since May, since we launched this ecosystem. I literally was writing new stuff for it until about an hour before the presentation, and I spent about another hour this morning getting up to date even more on it. So I'm going to just start. So if you're here, you know who I am, but I'm a USA Today bestselling author. Monica Leonelle is my business partner. I've raised almost $500,000 on Kickstarter. I've raised over $1 million in my business. I've helped authors raise over $1 million for their business in the past couple of years through our training academy. And I've helped hundreds, probably thousands of authors throughout my career. If you know who we are, you probably know us through Kickstarter, and specifically through this book, Get Your Book Selling on Kickstarter. It's our best-selling book in the Book Sales Supercharge series. I should just ask before, just to make sure y'all can see this presentation, right? Because this is what happened before. Y'all can. I was like 20 minutes into the presentation. Someone was like, I can't actually see that. So if you can hear me and see me, awesome. Yay. Amazing. All right. So if you have questions, put it in the chat. Monica and I will stop every once in a while to ask and see if there are any relevant questions. But yes, our book sales supercharge series is almost 20 books now. And then this is the best-selling book. I think still the best-selling book in that series. And I'm best known for Kickstarter. And Kickstarter did really changed my career, and it's changed a lot of people's careers. We've helped 125 campaigns raise over $1.2 million. And I always tell people, this is what I can track. It's a lot more, but after we got to about 125, it just became way harder to judge. Like, I would miss campaigns. People would not post their campaigns in the group. Like, we would get tagged on campaigns, and it just became kind of unwieldy after that much. But I figured $1.2 million is a good number. I'm sure we've probably doubled or tripled that since then when you take into account the book and everyone that's helped. But I know I can track that much money that we've helped raise for campaigns since we started the accelerator in 2022. And it's this campaign that we saw a problem. So we have 3 main courses: Direct Sales Accelerator, Wide, Go Wide, Grow Wide, and Kickstarter Accelerator. And after about a year of doing this, we started to see some weird trends in the data. For instance, 20% of people blew past expectations. They could have 100 people on their email list, and they would do almost $10,000 Kickstarter. And we were like, well, that's weird. And then we started seeing 6-7-figure authors who were killing it in KU make like less than $1,000. And we were like, well, that's even weirder. Both of these things are equally weird. And then we, of course, had the problem of 50% of people that didn't hit launch. These are actually really good numbers if you are in the course space, but they were not really good enough for us. And we wanted to know why so many of our people either weren't hitting launch or were underperforming. And so the data showed us most of the people who overperformed shared pretty similar traits. Most of the people who underperformed shared similar traits. Most people who didn't hit launch at all had similar confusions or similar fears. And mostly it was about how the platform can work for them. And we overall found that there were 5 marketing and sales tendencies that people fell into that gave them success on different platforms, different types of marketing, they were very different, and how they worked led to different success paths, whether they were at the early stage of their career, their middle stage, or their or a high stage, and which led to us developing the motto: "You're not doing marketing wrong; you're doing the wrong marketing." So, just before I get into this, I want to talk a little bit about the history of book marketing, really the history of books in all, because prior to about 1920, I say after World War II, but people always point out really it was after World War I when a lot of this started happening. But before World War I, there really was no legitimate way to become an author unless you were an aristocrat. Unless you didn't need the money, you really couldn't be an author. And after World War I, but really after World War II, it became easier and easier to become an author as long as you lived in a power hub. New York, LA, Paris, London, a couple more places around the world. If you lived in one of those places, you could do really well. And that lasted until the formation of Kindle, basically, and especially KU. But once Kindle started coming along, you were able to make a living from anywhere if you were an author. But with the formation of KU, it was, again, if you do the KU way, if you can write a book a month in a certain genre, in certain ways, following certain tropes, you could be really successful. There are all sorts of promo stacks and basically orthodoxy of how to become a successful author. And what happened really starting in, I think in 2018, definitely with the pandemic, is people started to see that KU started to break down, and they started to be all of these other options for people. And that has led to an explosion of ways to succeed in your business and do book marketing, and 1,000 ways to be successful, and also 1,000 ways to fail. And what was really interesting is Monica and I talk to authors all the time. We've been talking to successful authors for 25 years between the two of us. And it was interesting because even though the orthodoxy was that there was this way to succeed, most people did break in a specific way, but successful authors ended up all building their own stack. And they ended up embracing their own natural tendencies or bringing other people in that had other natural tendencies to help their business grow. And this is where the author ecosystem can really, really, really help, because I'm going to show you the 5 tendencies, and then how you can build upon them to grow using your own natural tendencies. So before we get into that, this is kind of the intro. I like stopping and making sure that there are no questions in general. Monica, do we have any kind of general questions? Maybe I didn't go over something or need to hit again before I get into...
No,
Cool.
There are no major questions. We're just, people are asking how long the presentation will be. I said probably an hour to an hour and a half. One just came in. Would you apply ecosystem thinking to new authors or wait till they have more of a business model? So this is a question we get a lot.
Yes.
This person's releasing a second book.
Yes, and I definitely think that, in the next year, we're going to start talking a lot more about how to bake these ecosystem stuff into your books from at the base level. But I do think that you're going to find one that resonates with you. You might not know if it resonates, but I would say you probably should at least pick one to try. The great thing about the ecosystem is that you're encouraged, and your goal is to have pieces of all 5 work for you. So I'm a base tundra, but I have a lot of forest in me, and I have a lot of grassland that I've been working on, especially in my nonfiction. I'm trying to add all of these things, and the ecosystem is meant to be additive. But we're going to go through later, and I'm going to show you the 5 stages of what these ecosystems look like. And so it's going to probably be apparent which ecosystem resonates with you at the beginning and where you should start. But it might be that you start all of those things and you don't build any traction, and maybe you're like, well, maybe I'll try a grassland strategy because that resonates with them. Maybe that will resonate more with me. But I don't, Monica, do you disagree, agree with any of that? Is there anything you'd add?
I mean, to me, I think that the best way to tell if you, especially if you're a new author, is probably, so I do agree with what you're saying. I also think a lot of it is like how you think about writing to market. I think that is kind of going to help you pinpoint what your author ecosystem is, just because, and like it's tough because we haven't really put out any material around that, so we can't, and I don't think now is like kind of the right time to explain it, but people talk about right to market, and we basically believe that there are really like 5 different ways to write to a market, not one, which is there's like one main one that's taught. So I think that's where we can kind of hook in the author ecosystems to the craft conversation that is more prominent for authors who have just a couple books out.
Yeah, absolutely. Basically, I think that like if you're really good at writing to market in the way that traditionally like the Mark Dawsons and Michael Anderle says, you're probably a desert. And if not, like you're probably one of the other ecosystems. So that's a really stark dividing line. If the things that we'll talk about deserts, we should probably just get into it, work for you, you probably are a desert. If not, you're one of the other 60% of people. And like, so yes, you can do this at the beginning of your career, but you might not know exactly what works for a little bit of time. And we'll go into that. I do have a little bit on what the 5 tendencies are when it comes to trends. Anything else, Monica?
No.
Okay.
Sorry, I was just shaking my head.
No. Okay, cool. All right. So let's start with deserts. So what is a desert superpower? Well, their superpower is optimization. They are the people who can see behind the code of the matrix and know the pulse of the industry. So I think of a desert as someone who can say exactly what the trend is that is emerging, and then they can write it to success. This is the orthodoxy that most people teach, because so much of the industry is KU, and this is so people like Michael Anderle, Mark Dawson, most of the thought leaders in the industry, in the way that you would consider thought leadership, teach this KU strategy and have had success in KU. And their basic success metric is they are almost ghosts in groups, because they need to get all of that really good data before even a place like K-Lytics gets it, because their job is to find the gap between supply and demand and really, really ride that gap hard until the gap closes, and then they move to the next trend. So if you're thinking about deserts, think about like a salamander. A salamander finds shade, and then when the shade goes away, they find the next bit of shade, and they're always hopping to where the next oasis is, or the next bit of shade is. And that is the success path for a desert. And they can do that because they are able to know what readers want in the general market. So this is one of the wildest things that we found out about deserts. And we talked to a bunch of deserts at NINC just to confirm it. Most people think about fandom, where there's casual readers, and then you're trying to bring people into your ecosystem and make them super fans. And that's where like your fandom is the super fans. Deserts don't think like that. Deserts look at the whole amount of, let's say there's 1 million thriller readers, and they say, if I can find a book that's read by 50,000 of them, then I have done fan service. That's how I think about fans. The people that read my work are fans of the genre. And if I write for them, then I am doing my fan service. So they don't generally have like email lists or even fan pages, really. They're pretty much ghosts aside from their books. And they're able to create these experiences because they are looking at the entire genre as a whole and trying to hit the middle of the genre where they can get the most readers and service the most fans, which is very, very different than any other ecosystem. And that also makes them really good co-writers, ghostwriters, and journalists. So if you think of a desert, you can kind of think of them like a beat reporter. So they're the ones who are always trying to get the scoop, get the front page headline, and get the most people to read their books, their articles. So they have natural aptitudes for KU, web stores, and advertising. If you ever look at someone and they're like, look, you just have to like look at what is hot, and then you can just game the algorithm to show your work the most, like all of those virality things that like big data insights, they're probably a desert because they take pride in servicing the most people, and they take pride in the work itself. They are able to lose themselves. So most other authors want some bit of themselves to appear in the work. But a desert has the ability to say, these are the 6 trends. This is how you hit that trend. And my joy is in making the puzzle connect between all of these things. Often when another ecosystem tries to follow this, they consider it homework. Like it's not fun for them to make that game work and optimize that game. So their work doesn't come across as vibrant as a desert's because it feels like they just did homework. So when you think of, we'll talk about how they think about trends. Deserts want to stay 100% on trend. And they are able to ride these trends because they are creating these very siloed experiences that resonate with a certain group of fans. So when we talk about whether you should make 1 pen name or 8 pen names, this is a huge argument in indie publishing. And the truth is, like anything else, there's no real right answer. But for a desert, they are creating a different brand experience with every pen name, with every genre they write, really also with every series. So they should absolutely make all of these different pen names, and they should absolutely silo themselves off. If you're not a desert, we'll talk about that part as well later. But if you are a desert, you absolutely should be siloing pen names, and because you're going to deliver a different brand experience every time you write in every different genre, as opposed to someone like a Forrest who has a different success path. Monica, do you have anything to add, or do we have any questions about that part? Oh, wait, I forgot the difficulties. Okay, so difficulties. Difficulty of a desert is turning casual readers into super fans. And honestly, it's often because they don't want to. They don't want fandoms. They don't want like an email list. They just want to write and then write the next book and put the next book out. A lot of the reason why a desert can write so fast to hit the KU algorithm is because they don't have fan groups. They don't have any of this stuff. All of their time is just write a book, release a book, write a book, release a book, write a book, release a book. They struggle with platforms that require a long time commitment. A place like Kickstarter or Patreon or anything that's fan based, they're going to struggle with because they don't have a natural aptitude for doing the work to generate that community and that long-term brand loyalty. That is a big struggle for deserts too, because if you think of pulp authors of the 50s, 60s, 70s, very few of them remained relevant because their books were very ephemeral. They were a product of their time. And so deserts often see that they've written 50 books. And after 50 books, they're like, wow, none of these books have any value right now on the open market because like I wrote them as a product of their time. I need to, and their struggle is how do I move from this world where I write a lot of books and I hit the middle of the market and I'm making money to something where my backlist is working for me a lot more. And then one of the fun things about a desert is almost always they have a forest pen name, which we'll talk about, which is as an outlet that they can't monetize. And the main reason they can't monetize it is it's off trend and they don't know how to do the work of what a forest is known for. And what is good at is building community and being able to write books that are very much them and having a fandom who really resonates with them. And it's almost the exact opposite of a desert's success path. Okay, now I'm ready to move to a grassland. Monica, do we have anything about deserts or anything you want to add or clarify?
Somebody did ask, they kind of made a comment and it was just like, hey, every time that I listen to, the presentation, I think I might be this type or this type or this type. So what are some types or ways that, like, how can you tell that you are a desert?
Sure. Okay.
And how can you tell that you are not a desert?
Okay. So this is about sales and marketing success. So the thing that I'm going to say is like a tough love thing. If you can follow the trend and you put out a book and you are right, and you enjoy that challenge, you are probably a desert. So we talked to someone at NINC who was really good at following the trends, and she was really good at doing the 6-book optimization, because like 6-book is the optimum book length before readers fall off. So like you have 6 books, you have book 1 to 3, book 4 to 6, and book 1 to 6 box set. Like it's real pretty. And like she was really good at doing that, but she hated it. So this is the marriage of a thing you do really well and a thing you like doing, right? Like I think so with a desert, we'll talk about this but like they are always right.
You're right. Yeah. Yeah, I think that's the thing that I see the most is like there are types that are attracted to the idea of the desert or the idea of being a desert, but it's like, are you able to actually do the work and get the sales and marketing and like business results from doing that work? Because deserts are really focused on that optimization. And so it's like, yeah, of course I like theoretically want to be like very optimized and do everything right and check off all the boxes. And I think that in particular appeals a lot to forests. It can also appeal to tundras and grasslands. I think it doesn't really appeal to aquatics for the most part, but it's like those types, they want to be the desert because it's like kind of makes them like the good girl and the good boy, especially because desert strategy just happens to be what is taught the most in the publishing space, especially in the end of. Oh yeah, go ahead.
Can you talk about you said the person who wrote the book and it was like baby, marriage, baby, and then the thing, because I think this is a really good encapsulation of like the difference between a desert and a not desert.
Marriage, baby, and then the thing.
The postpartum depression.
Oh yeah. Okay. So yeah, and somebody asked about this anyway. They said that they're a forest, and they can't really make KU work for them, or it didn't, not that it didn't work for them, just that they saw some success, but not a ton of success. So we actually, there was a forest that we talked to that actually had a lot of success in KU. And one of the reasons that they had success was because it wasn't because they were really writing to trend in the way that they were supposed to, is because they found this like kind of niche market that didn't have a lot of books in it yet. And so like that's a thing that everybody kind of tells you to do anyway, is like find this area. So I think it was reverse harem and like curvy girls. And so they were I don't know if they were one of the first authors in that space or what, but they started to write in that space and also did like ads and stuff, like kind of again, we're checking off all the boxes of the things you are supposed to do to be successful at this. So then they were talking about the romances that they were writing, because you would think like, okay, this person's a desert, but they weren't. They talked about the romances that they were writing, and then they said, the person gets married, the person has a baby, and then the person has postpartum depression. And I was like, this is not how romances end. It's supposed to be like, it's supposed to be kind of a happily ever after. But that actually resonated a lot with their audience, because that is something that women experience quite a bit, is postpartum depression. And so the audience was pretty like okay with it. And a lot of that is because there were like a number of other things as this person was talking that I was like, okay, they're absolutely a forest, because they had built this community around really like twisting the tropes, I think. And I think that's how a lot of forests are successful in KU. So if you are a forest and you're like, I really like what the deserts are doing, but like, I can't quite do it. I think a couple of things are like, choose, you have to choose, like, you have to find an attention arbitrage. So you need to pick a niche that is very empty right now. Like, I just don't like, unless you are a desert, I don't recommend jumping into a niche that does not have lots of space for books. So you need to pick that, you need to get that attention arbitrage. You need to write at least 80% to the right to market. You're probably not going to get to 100%, but you need to get to like at least 80%. And then you also need to like basically gather your community quickly. So like this person, the reason that they had succeeded is because they hit ads like really, really hard with just like 2 books, 3 books, 5 books. And they kind of like blanketed the space. And so people, like everybody tried it that wanted to read like a reverse harem curvy girls, like everybody in the whole genre tried it. And then they got enough of those people to be part of their community. And so now they're safe because they have this community. So now they can keep building their author career from there because they have like kind of this committed community. And, unless like that's actually the only way that I've seen, really any forests do well in KU. And it is kind of sad because I've also seen forests who like have done that in one place and that they try to do it again, but they're using just desert tactics. So anyway, I'll turn it back to Russell. So
that's what I was going to say, especially is like, it's like a lot of people will have success for a short amount of time and then they'll try to do it again in a different thing and they can't replicate it. So like, it's not only did you hit it once and it worked, like, can you continually ride the trend? Can you move the goalposts like over and over and over again? And like, can you hit the trend regardless of like what the genre is, as long as you have interest in it? There's always people that Monica and I text and we're like, I'm like, what is the hot thing now? And they'll be like, within 3 seconds, like they'll be like this. And I was like, oh, yeah, okay, thank you. Now I don't have to do all of that research. So like, it's a lot of research. It's a lot of all of that stuff. And it's really about, can you hit the trend? Can you stay 100% or like 90%, 98% on trend? Because that's how you're going to succeed as a desert. Now let's talk about succeeding as a grassland. So a desert is very data heavy. A grassland is very data heavy. But instead of predicting trends that are happening right now, a grassland's success comes from depth and predicting trends 1 to 2 years out. Usually they have a really long series with incredible depth that no one can match. And often they're trying to move the trend so that it becomes the trend. So that by the time that trend gets hot, boom, they've got 20 books in it. So if you've ever watched Hamilton, they are the ones who will write their way out. When Hamilton goes, I'll just write my way out of this problem. Like that is a grassland strategy. In nonfiction, they usually pick one topic or two topics. Monica's a great example. She started her career talking about productivity, novel productivity, then wide, and now direct sales, but she's kind of weaved all of that stuff together. Which I'm sure she can talk about once I get done with the brief overview. So their natural aptitudes are places like Medium, Substack, fiction apps, wide retailers, anything that rewards length of time and rewards you for continuing to put out work over time. Monica calls this putting pennies in the bank. They're experts at content marketing and getting everything to kind of point back to them, so that by the time the author community is, or the reader community is ready to really get excited about a topic, like they already have 20 books on, and everyone's like, wait, how did Elena Johnson get like 30 books on like cowboy romances? I didn't even know about cowboy romances existed until like 2 days ago. And so they have a long time horizon. And what they're doing, they're not 100% on trend. They're like 90% on trend. They do something called the trend weaving, which is they take what their topic is or their niche is, and whatever is hot at the moment, they're weaving that trend into their next book. So if it's curvy girls, like it'll be a cowboy and a curvy girl that like are relationship, or like whatever that trend is, they're moving their long series and bringing that stuff together, which is why they can't stay 100% on trend. So they're giving up some of their that right to market in order to get people into their long series. And that's how they're winning. They're winning by having these long series. They're able to, let's say we talked about how there's a gap between book, let's call it 7 and 10. So they're able to find ways to summit that gap so that they can have success on a 20 book series where most people will fall off. And there's all sorts of ways that they do it. I heard a great one, which was like to seed characters in book 1 who end up paying off in book 7. So there's not a drop at that time. But Grasslands have all of these ways to kind of summit that gap so that they can have these long series and make all of that and have that success. They have difficulty launching because they always want to do research. They're the George R. R. Martins of authors. Like they always have another rabbit hole to go down. But more importantly, their success is kind of being under the radar and then popping up once the market is ready and once they own the topic. So if they like, it almost makes sense why they have a struggle launching, because launching is saying, hi, I'm ready to make this a topic now. And like, so that there's always that fear that they're going to launch too soon. And so they have a problem saying, look at me, I want money. Not that every author doesn't have that, like, well, not tundras and not deserts, but like tons of authors have a problem with saying like, hi, like it's me, I'm the author, it's me, and I want you to buy this thing. They have real shiny object syndrome. It's a big problem for Grasslands. I mean, if you just look at like George R. R. Martin, he's always going down some new rabbit hole, or like he's like, the book's not quite done yet. I need to like explore this dishwasher in like 5 kingdoms over. And they're very much of the opinion, if they just think about it enough, the solution will present itself. But they are a desert often will evolve into a grassland because it's very data heavy and it is a lot of trend watching. It's just instead of spending most of their time trying to extract value from the short-term trend, they're more long-term focused, and then they're weaving those current trends into what they're doing. Monica, since you are a grassland, anything that I missed?
I mean, it's always like kind of it's like, oh man, it's so true. Like everything you just said is so true. So I don't know. I don't think there's anything you missed. I mean, yeah, that's me in a nutshell. I could go on and about like how it's me, but I don't
Any
know.
any questions about this part?
There, no, I don't. Well, so somebody did say I'm definitely a grassland, and they, kind of like, hey, stop tagging me in this presentation type of thing. So people are just like, yep, always doing research, not, not wanting to not wanting to launch. Like, so people are just commenting in terms of that.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
so
here's the
yes, you hit
thing
the
about
nail on the head.
here's the thing about grasslands and deserts. They are almost always right. So it is freakily prescient how well Monica can determine what will be a thing in the author community in a year or 2 years. I'm getting better at it, but like Monica, like 2 years, like a year and a half before we did the Kickstarter thing, like she was like, this is gonna be a thing when we start talking about direct sales. Like, this is gonna be the thing. Like, she is almost always right. Not like I was like 10 years ago, we're going to have to do direct sales, but I had no idea when it was going to happen. Whereas like Monica is like freaky good at telling you what the trend is going to be and then it coming true. So I'm not saying all of you who think your grasslands are not grasslands. I'm sure you all are, because grasslands want data more than anything. And like, this is more data for them. So like this author ecosystem is like catnip for grasslands. But it's really important when you're thinking about grasslands, are you right? Like, because like, for instance, forests also like to go deep on random niche topics, and they'll be talking about like spoons for a year and being like, wait, it's knives? I thought we were talking about spoons. So like, if you can predict a trend and then it also comes true, then you probably are a grassland. There are ways to do this as a forest as well, but it is the other three ecosystems have a lot more give as far as their rightness, because a forest, a desert and a grassland have success tacking mostly to the middle of a trend. They have a lot less room to be wrong. And they're using it for so long. So just keep that in mind. I'm sure all of you lovely grasslands are actually grasslands, and you're totally right. But do think about that. So let's move on to tundras. Hey, now I'm going to start tagging me. So what is a tundra's superpower? Their superpower is excitement. So they love to pull the band back, and then when it's at full, the biggest point, letting it go forward and with the most potential to kinetic energy. So what they do is they stack tropes on top of each other. So we talk a lot about Melanie Harlow and Skye Warren, and we don't know if they're tundras, but like they exhibit tundra tendencies. If you've ever taken the J.A. Huss Perfect Year, where she talks about four releases a year spaced apart, kind of like a fashion designer, like that is like the tundra playbook. If you look at how Skye Warren releases, she can get to the top of a category because she stacks all of these tropes onto each other, on top of each other, and she'll hit number one, and then she'll like live off the long tail for a long time. And she even talks about the long tail a lot. Someone like Melanie Harlow, both Tadra and Monica mentioned this at NINC, which they saw Melanie at different months of the year have different blurbs that highlight different tropes that are in her book. And she only wrote one book, but she stacked it with so many tropes that like she could basically promote that book throughout the year to different audiences depending on what was hot. So I always say, like, as a tundra, if you're writing fantasy, you should write fairy tales or dragons, or probably both. And like they will be popular forever. And so you're really looking more for evergreen tropes. And here is the big thing about tundras. There are not very many of them, and they need a lot of rest and recovery between them. So if you are not a tundra and you are like, why can't I hit number one? It's because they give 100% energy for a very short amount of time, and then they hibernate and they spend a lot of time recovering. If you look at Sky, like, she just goes dark for 8 months sometimes at a time, and then she'll come back and like hit number one again, because she's recovering, she's rebuilding her list. Tundras have to do a lot more audience building because they burn through their list way faster than any other ecosystem, because they're constantly launching. It's constantly that build up and that come down. So if you are not a tundra and you have tundra envy for being number one, that is why, because they are putting all of their energy in one small amount of time, whereas a grassland is putting minimal energy. I mean, not minimal energy, but like they're in power saver mode at 20 to 50% at all times. And that's how they're able to do the content marketing. If you are a tundra and you are like, why can Monica make posts all of the time? It's because she doesn't have the manic highs that a tundra does. There's not a number one. So we all have the same amount of energy. Well, that's not true. People have different kinds of energy, but like they use it in different ways. So a desert has energy to write all of those books because they're not doing anything else. They're just writing a book, and then they're writing a book, and they're writing a book, they're writing a book. A grassland has this low key energy at all times, because they so that they can keep writing these posts and doing these things and putting these energy pennies in the bank. A tundra takes all of that time and condenses it to like 1-2 week period, and then they survive by living off the fat that they made by having these huge launches. And it's really important that you understand that you can hit number one, but you have to basically almost change your business model often. So their natural aptitude obviously is on Kickstarter and in KU, because KU is so like getting the most amount of money in a small amount of time. They do really, really, really well when like they are front loading their launches. They do well at conventions with landing pages. Anything where scarcity is really important. And it's really important that you understand this part for the scarcity, because scarcity is my best friend. It is Monica's worst enemy, because she needs to have people be able to find our work and her work throughout the entire year whenever it's convenient for them. What we found last year was a lot of people that would have probably bought our books or our stuff if it was open all year long, wouldn't do it because they would find the page and then be like, oh, I have to wait 3 months. Like, it's almost like she needs to capture the excitement the moment that it happens, as opposed to me, who can build that excitement over time. So I find that I have a lot more success in these short burst launches, because I like to then hibernate and go away forever. Although if you know me at all, you know I have stopped doing that really, but I used to always go away. Things that tundras need to look out for. Okay, so an unhealthy tundra will listen to this and be like, cool, I have 1,000 subscribers. I'm just going to run 50 launches, and they'll never rebuild. You have to rebuild your mailing list. There is a time for launching and a time for recovery and a time for rebuilding. You must rebuild your audience every single time, every single launch. Without that recovery time, you will absolutely burn out. The only reason you do not burn out is because you are able to take that energy and then recover from it for several weeks. I recommend there's a Marc Jacobs masterclass that you can watch, but the idea is thinking like a fashion designer. They have these 4 fashion weeks throughout the year, and the rest of their year is about recovering from, building up to that, and then getting their work kind of spidering into all of these other places. So it spiders into their showrooms and all of that other stuff. But like a Tundra's success path is about launching hard and then recovering for a long period of time. Monica and I both tried to do both of these last year, and shockingly, it didn't work very well. If you are part of my Substack, I wrote about it a couple months ago, and this thinks that went to burn it all down. But it was really important to understand that, like, I can go hard or I can't go at all. I don't have the ability to, like, I have no chill, even though I really want to learn more chill. Monica, anything to add before I move on to forests?
No, somebody did comment. So there are no questions, but somebody did comment. Just Nick. Nick was commenting that he's a grassland, but he has learned how to build some excitement for his stuff by just watching you. And I agree with that as a grassland too. I feel like there was like no way I could have ever figured out Kickstarter without seeing your system for it and how you build that energy. And I think that's where I just think that's where, if you are a Tundra, it makes a lot of sense to like follow Russell's Kickstarter stuff and like read our Kickstarter book, and if you can, take our Kickstarter course as well. But it just, I don't know. You know, like I also like we were saying, we also see this in the contemporary romance space. And so I think the reason that there are so many contemporary romance authors who they basically do have kind of that 4-book launch strategy, you don't see that as much in other genres, I think. But I think the reason why is because if you want to hit #1 on Amazon, the easiest way to do so is in contemporary romance, like, period. Yes. So it's just a matter of, like, they chose contemporary romance literally because they could more easily hit #1.
Absolutely. Yeah, you are going to see a lot more Tundras in contemporary romance, probably thriller too, just like the biggest categories, because they need the most excitement possible to literally have their business survive. So the reason why Kickstarter works really well for a Tundra who might be a fantasy author is because you can use that excitement to build, to make more money from fewer people. And so you can build up that same kind of excitement and still have a really successful launch. Whereas it's a really hard to do it in, for instance, horror. Horror just does not have very many readers, and it's very hard to hit a high number, like, and I mean like top 100 in the store without like some big publisher behind you, because like there's just a finite amount of those readers. Whereas in contemporary romance, that number is nearly infinite, especially if you're in KU at the moment. All right. And we're going to talk about forests. And so I want to say this before I do forests. A Tundra is a sales funnel without a flywheel, and we'll talk about that. A grassland and forest and even aquatic are really flywheels without a sales funnel. And a desert probably is more sales funnely than they are flywheel. But really, if you are the easiest path for a grassland, aquatic, or forest is to evolve into a Tundra, and then a Tundra to evolve into probably a grassland or forest for reasons that I'll get into, but mostly it's because being an aquatic is ridiculously expensive. Okay, so what is a forest superpower? Interconnectivity. Now here is the key for a forest. When we first started doing this, we talked a lot about community and having Facebook groups and like being really good at like building a community. Then people who were forests were like, I actually don't like having a community. And so we kind of had to go back and realize that what forests are really good at is interconnecting all of their books and adding Easter eggs that make everyone have a shared language in their universe. So we have a friend, Sarah Cannon, who's puts Hello Kitty in all of her books, or at least all of her series. And a desert probably would never do that because they're trying to hit the trend right now. But a forest is going to want to have that Easter egg all over their books. They are so while a desert is very good at delivering an experience for that fits 100% on trend, a forest is good at their secret power is delivering the same brand experience across all of their books. So while a desert, it probably should have different pen names for all of their different series, a forest can have one pen name for everything because their brand experience is the same across all of the books that they write. In fact, a very popular thing for a fan of a forest writer to say is, I didn't think I'd like X genre, but I really liked when you wrote it. And it's because they're delivering the same universal fantasy. If you have not read Theodora Taylor's Seven-Figure Fiction, if you do not follow her Substack, and you are a forest, this is your monarch. You should follow everything that she says, because universal fantasy is like a universal fantasy for a desert changes. It's dependent on what the reader expectation is. They will change their universal fantasy based on what the reader is and what's hot at the time. So like a desert also needs to know what the universal fantasy is. A grassland has to know what a universal fantasy is because they are keeping it across their topic or their series. As a tundra, I need to know my universal fantasy, but because you are writing so many different things across so many different genres, usually forests have a billion pen names. It is critical for you to understand what your universal fantasy is and be able to deliver it consistently. Once you can do that, you will be able to bring in readers across genres. So their natural aptitudes, wildly, are almost the exact opposite of a desert. Patreon, Ream, wide, live events, places where you have a lot longer time to reach people and people can connect together and you can form like a brand identity and a cohesive narrative around your work that everyone can enjoy and talk about. Forests have, so I think most people are wrong about how they talk about community, because they always talk about having people talk about seafood or like whatever, like the new macaroni and cheese dish, or like they always talk about community, about building around the work. But most other ecosystems that are not forests build community through their work. Monica and I have a ton of readers. We never talk about like any of the wild things that we see forests talk about. And it's because forests have put all of these Easter eggs that are part of them, that resonate with the reader, that they want to talk about. And so they're able to connect together around it in a way that other ecosystems just are not. So it is about community for forests, but it's not about actually having a Facebook group or whatever. It's about you developing a shared language that people can talk about and brand themselves at. So while a desert is staying 100% on trend, because people always ask me, great, I'm a forest, now how do I grow? A forest succeeds when they twist a trope. So they will take the same genre and they will say, and a forest and a desert will say, do you want the perfect representation of this genre? Then read my book. It's every feeling that you want is there. That's how much I love this genre. I'm going to do it perfectly. A forest will say, I also love this genre, because that's a big thing that forests, for some reason, say a lot, is like, don't you hate it? Don't you hate this genre? And you're like, no, I love this genre. So what you're looking for is switch on the trope. I'll give you an example from my own career. Katrina Hates the Dead is a post-apocalyptic book about a girl who, a woman who gets sick of living during the apocalypse and sets out to kill the devil. So at the time, this was 2011, there were just a lot of books about like the beginning of the apocalypse. And I was like, this is like, I love these books, but like, I want to read a book that's happens years later when everyone is just bored. Like, so my twist was, I love this genre, but isn't it weird how all of the books happen at the apocalypse level? Like, don't you want to read something that's a little bit later in the experience? What would happen if something, if like we just move the needle a few years? And now that has happened over time, but like, it's the same. A desert will be like, this is the perfect post-apocalyptic book. You'll get everything. And this is like, this is a post-apocalyptic book, and it's going to give you almost everything. But like, what would happen if this twist? If you're a comics book fan and you've ever read What If is a Marvel series where they're like, what if Wolverine was Scott Summers' father? And they just like twisted the thing that you knew, but they twisted it in their own universe. I loved that series as a kid. So when you talk about like, how does a forest grow? It's the exact thing that Monica was saying about the postpartum depression. First, there was love, then there was marriage, then there was a baby carriage, and then there was postpartum depression. Whereas everything else would be like, so how you would say that for a desert is like, I'm going to write you the perfect trilogy of books. I'm going to write the love, and then I'm going to write the marriage, then I'm going to write the baby. And a forest would be like, I'm going to write you a series that's like love, marriage, baby, and then what happens after, like if like you have you got like touched out or any of those, or like something like that. And like, it's still the same love. This is the most important thing for a forest. Like, your messaging is really wrong if you ever say anything but I love this series, but isn't this weird, or something like that, where like you're showing that you also love the series and understand the tropes, because that is how someone's going to feel the permission to read your book, because you know all of the tropes that a desert knows, main tropes that the desert knows. You just are using them in a way to switch something up. So here is the biggest problem for a forest: is forests love talking as if everyone is their biggest fan. They always talk in inside jokes. They are very welcoming to people in the community, but they feel imposing to people who are not in the community. They're like, wow, I have to know a lot to even do this series. There's 50 books. This is a lot. And this is why forests usually don't do very well on Kickstarter, or as well as they could do, because they are always talking to their biggest fan instead of giving people permission to join their universe. So there are new people, there are casual readers, there are fans, and there are super fans. And a great Kickstarter campaign or landing page has something for the super fans to show their love, but also as a way to turn fans into super fans, casual readers into fans, and people who don't read into casual fans or into fans. And almost every time I read one of these Kickstarter campaigns, the first thing I ask is, who did you write this for? Because I don't understand what you just wrote. Any of this, none of this makes sense. And so if it's clear and you have to make these things clear and concise for outsiders. And just remember that, like, you need to talk as if people outside of your group can be welcomed inside of it. Not that you aren't welcoming, but if you think of a forest looms when you are outside of it, and it's probably pretty cozy inside of it. So they are also the hardest to get going because they move between genres, which is why you need to really focus on your theme over your genre. You need to be delivering a consistent brand experience across all of your work. And you really need to do kind of like what RJ Blaine did. RJ Blaine had all of these series, and then she had her magical romantic comedy with a body count series, and that took off. And suddenly everyone interconnected all of the books because everyone loves RJ's books. Everyone loves like everything that RJ does because she has the same brand experience. It's her every book, as opposed to a desert who is different, who can be different every book. They're very much a chameleon. And they have different brand identities. A forest has a single brand identity, which is why they're so good at interconnectivity. Okay, so as I mentioned, a forest and a grassland are flywheels which is basically you're able to keep people inside of your community for a long time, but you struggle to bring people in and make sales. A tundra is a funnel, which is really good at getting sales with no flywheel. So ideally, depending on which of these you are, or if you're an aquatic, usually a tundra will need to pick a flywheel, and an aquatic and a flywheel will need to pick a funnel. Monica, anything to add before I go on to aquatics, or any questions?
Yeah, there are a couple of things. So one thing, so anyway, there's a ton of comments about the forest in particular. I'm just going to read some of them because I feel like the forests are the most excited about this. They said that what you were saying about universal fantasy resonated, and shared language resonated so much more with them than community specifically. They said that they're obsessed with Easter eggs, the shared language. They don't really like the Facebook group style of doing things, or they don't have a Facebook group. And then a couple of them said, I always write the same type of book. I'm trying to embrace my story more than anything. They love the trope twisting stuff. One line that somebody uses, it's X trope, but with a twist. And so that seems to work well for them in ads. 2 pen names in the same universal fantasy. Just now hearing this for the first time. Mind blown. They love what if. Somebody said there's such a forest who's been trying to work like a desert. Gack. And yes, we hear that one a lot. Yeah, so what else? They love Neil Gaiman comp.
So I would say of all of them, a forest, a grassland can see a lot of themselves in a desert because they are very data heavy. A tundra can see a lot of themselves in a desert because they're trying to build excitement and optimization. So some of the things that like deserts teach about like resonates, even if it doesn't work quite as well. To me, the forest is the most on the other side of that trend. Would you say that's accurate, Monica?
Yeah, I would. Yeah, I don't have anything to add, but yes, I do. I think that was one thing I mentioned in the comments, is that sometimes it feels like deserts and forests, like a lot of what's happening in the indie community and the conversations is like desert versus forest, almost like desert way of thinking versus forest way of thinking. And I think it's very specific to this community. So like, because I feel like that needs to be said, that like in the fashion community, for example, like the tundra model is very dominant. In film, it's probably more of an aquatic model. In television, it's probably the grassland model. So in publishing, it just happens to be the desert model, and specifically in indie publishing. I think forests are much more, and aquatics are much more welcome or sought out on the trad pub side. But yeah, I do think it's important to say that a lot of what is taught in the community right now, the dominant messaging about how to do sales and marketing, is very desert oriented right now.
Yes. And so it is. And if you teach other authors, this is really also important, because this is like, you probably are talking to, if you are talking to people who are not having success in KU, or like through the orthodox method, you probably are talking to a lot of forests. And the thing that I have learned in the past month is how to talk to deserts. What I think, Monica, like I spent the most amount of time learning how to talk to deserts, because they are the ones who are most likely to already be having success, but they're also coming up on different roadblocks. And I feel like the first year of our business, we were talking about community and all of these things, and deserts were like, that's not how we,
Right.
like you have no idea what like fandom is. Like this is not fandom at all. Like we didn't have the language to talk to 40% or more of the author community.
Yes, I agree with that. Yeah, we've learned like quite a bit about deserts and about like desert problems that they're hitting. Because I think the biggest one, which you've already talked about, is really that they kind of leave like this trail of books that like they leave this trail of backlists that like no longer works for them almost, or that they struggle to get working for them, because it's almost like it has like their backlist has such a shelf life. And so it's like how do they like start anew in many ways. We talked to a lot of deserts that are like kind of starting anew of like, wow, I've been writing for so long, but like I kind of have nothing long term to show for it. And so we talk about we've talked to, well, so anyway, there are actually a lot of forest related questions. So one of them is, from the beginning, if I'm a florist, but I'm also planning on publishing other authors, should I focus on attracting fellow florists?
So what we're towards the end, we're going to talk about this a little bit more, but one of the best methodologies, and I think this was Nick who was talking about this, but one of the reasons why this works so well for publishers is because it will help you design your publishing slate. So for instance, let's just take a shared world, for instance. You probably want 3 or 4 deserts, or one desert writing 3 or 4 books over the course of a year, but you don't want their books to come out like 2 years later. In fact, this is one of the great innovations that like a company like Harlequin, like they don't put out books 2 years later. And like they're very desert focused with what they are doing. And so if you were hiring deserts like to hit your trends, you need that to hit consistent income. You probably want at least one of those a quarter. Then you probably want, but like you have to know that those books are probably ephemeral. So you probably want a Tundra twice a year to make an evergreen book that's going to be able to be sold for the next 10 years. And then you probably want 3 or 4 forests, because you want to be able to get a really nice ARC team, or a really great or like a really great beta readers, or like you just want to pull the forest and like expose them to more people and like get them to, but you have to know that those are going to be books that are going to be like very narrow banded to a specific group. And then you want an aquatic, because aquatic's going to be able to talk about all of the different formats. And then you want a grassland who's kind of almost running it, but like knows where the trend is going, so they can turn people. And then you want them to come out last, probably if it's a year or 2 years universe, because they're going to be the ones taking all of these trends and like and making them work. And so that's not necessarily perfect. Like Monica and I have never sat down and said what the ideal publishing slate is. It might be all deserts. Like if you were a pulp publisher, like you published all deserts, and the reason you probably failed was because you looked back 30 years later and were like, oh, I've got nothing to show for it. None of these books are selling. So you probably don't want all forests, because then it's all trope twisting. So you probably want to, like, let's say you do a lit RPG publisher, you probably want mostly desert books, but you also want some trend twisting books. You want some like trend stacking books. You want some trend making books. You want maybe a big universe that you can build out. Like that's one of the other things that an aquatic is great for. So you should pick some forests, but you really need to kind of think about you need immediate cash flow, which is something that deserts are great with.
Yep.
You need long tail cash flow, which is something tundras after their book is launched are good at, because you can keep launching them, and also deserts. You want to build out like a bigger base beyond just books, and that's something aquatics are really great at. And then I missed one. Oh, forests. Like you want to have like a great community who loves all of your books. So like you want forests there also, but you want them in different ratios depending on what you're publishing. Yeah,
I think it's going to depend so much on your business model. But yeah, I would say you kind of want a little bit of everybody. I mean, the diversity is going to be really helpful. I do think there are forests who have massive audiences that are like, you know, like I see them on Patreon, for example. It's like you have like somebody will get onto Patreon and like they have 1,000 subscribers right away, or like some or Reem as well. And they have like 1,000 subscribers just like right out the gate. And
but
you know that person, I mean, honestly, like they probably are a forest, like maybe they're a tundra.
you might also see that like you might misjudge how big the overall community of that author is, because you're like 1,000 paid subscribers, but like they might not have the ability to grow like super far beyond the community that they have, because they're writing in a really small niche. Sorry, I just wanted to add that part in there, because sometimes you will get like, oh, this person's a huge author, and you're like, oh, but their audience, they've captured the whole audience that they could.
Right. Okay, so we'll keep going through these forest ones. So somebody asked, could you repeat the elements that the forest needs to do to be successful in KU or on retailers? And those, I did put them in the chat, but those are basically find an attention arbitrage, write at least 80% to the tropes, and then do the last 20%, you're allowed to do a trope twist, and then hit the market really hard. So you need to gather, like you need to be in front of the entire market for that trope, for that genre or sub niche or whatever you want to call it, as quickly as possible before that attention arbitrage runs out. And then you need to collect as many of those people as you can into your flywheel, which we'll talk about flywheel, but like community or shared language or whatever you want to talk about it. Like it's basically flywheel is like
whatever your home
container.
base is.
Yeah, your home base. Like you need them on your email list or just somewhere. Like you've got to be able to contact them and like continue interacting with them and building them, making them super fans basically. And if you can do that, then you'll be pretty successful, and you can parlay that into other things as long as you stick to your universal fantasy. But it's challenging.
Well,
so
this is one reason.
Yeah, go ahead.
The community part of this is why forests almost always misjudge trends, because they have a very unique set of things that their audience loves, and those things are almost never what the overall audience wants. So you also have to be able to, so I'll give you probably everyone in here who's been doing this for any length of time remembers the prison reform trend, where like every author was sure that like magical prison escape was going to be the next thing. It was right around at some point of one of the seasons of Orange is the New Black, and then like no readers wanted it. And whenever I see that, I'm like, oh, that was a trend that was like put up by forests. They really wanted that trend to be a case. Their audience was saying it would be great, but the overall audience does not want to do it. So the only thing I would add to what Monica said is you have to, if you want to have success in KU, you need to get your head out of your audience and find a way to mesh what your audience wants with what the overall audience wants.
Yes, I agree with that. Okay, so then somebody asked, flywheel versus funnel. Can you explain the imagery?
Sure. A flywheel. So how a pump works is that, so a flywheel is a way to get water to a well, from a well from the ground. I mean, I'm sure it does other things, but it's mainly for getting water from the ground. And a pump works by you exert the same pressure constantly, and Like it gives you the same water constantly. This is one of the reasons why everyone burns out, because they find something that has a relatively low barrier to entry, and then they just pump it. And every time they pump it for years, and like the same water comes out, and they're like, I'm done. Why is this not getting any easier? Well, enter the flywheel. The flywheel is a marketing concept designed by HubSpot, but it is not a it's not like only HubSpot. Like it's a thing that, again, like happens to get water out of the ground. But how it works is it's a wheel. Like it's a wheel and there's a spout, but like it's really, really hard. It often takes 2 or 3 people to get the flywheel started. So hard. But then with every rotation, it gets easier and easier and easier and easier. So this is why things like, when people say they hate marketing, I'm always like, well, you hate marketing now because you're not doing enough of it to like make it easier over time. But like building an email list or building whatever the thing is, building a Patreon, like it just gets easier. A subscription is a perfect, like if you are in subscriptions for authors, you're listening to Michael Evans or Amelia Rose, like they're always talking about like how hard it is to get started. And like, I agree. But like, then it gets easier and easier and easier and easier over time. So when you're a grassland, getting that first 10 books is going to be probably pretty brutal for you. But then every time you put a new book out, it's just going to grow. Well, as your reputation in genre comes out, you're just going to get easier and easier. And every book is going to have more and more and more. So it's hard and then it gets easy. Whereas a desert is pumping the same pump constantly. It doesn't get easier for a desert because they always have to have that same arbitrage. They have to find that arbitrage. Whereas when you have that flywheel going, it really works. People come into your system and they don't ever want to leave. So that's the biggest thing about a flywheel is it centers the customer. And then there's marketing and sales and growth and all of these other things in the circle that all work to make the experience better for the customer. But when you have 10,000 people in your community, it's a lot easier to service them than like having one. You have to do the same effort, but when you have 100 people, 1,000 people, whatever, it just gets easier and easier and easier. The easiest way I can say this in my own experience is Substack. I have like 175 paid subscribers to Substack, and it's way easier to do anything because like I'm getting like $600 or $1,000 every month just to like do the work of Substack. And the same thing with like Kickstarter. I put so much effort into Kickstarter, which is how I can launch my newest one. I launched with just like surprise, I launched it and like it's raised over $2,000 and I did no marketing for it except send 2 emails so far and hit launch. So like those are the things that like actually work are very, very hard at the beginning and then get easier over time. The problem is that very few people get over that part to actually get to the easy part. The stuff that most marketing people teach, like no offense to marketing people, is like the pump. Just like, hey, you could make a post and get 5 likes. Like you got to make the TikTok. You got to make 10 TikToks a day, but like you get the likes from it, but you still have to exert the same effort to get the same likes. And that's a pump. A sales funnel is you put a bunch of people in the top of the sales funnel, and it's like a funnel like you would have for like oil or something. And then some of those people that know you will like you will buy from you, or sorry, like you will trust you, and trust you will buy from you. And then, but the problem with a funnel is once you put people at the top, some of them come out the bottom. But what happens to all the people that fall off? They're just gone. What happens when people buy from you? They're just gone. So that's why you need a basin at the bottom to be like, if you're not buying, there's still this flywheel. There's still a reason for you to exist. And that's one of the reasons why sending all of these emails, like, and doing all of these hyper salesy things doesn't really work for a forest or a grassland, because they're interested in the long-term viability of their flywheel. Whereas a tundra has to learn how to not sell everything immediately and build that good base of people for their community. I don't know. Someone tell me if that makes any sense. Monica, did I totally pooch that, or is that good?
No, I think it makes a lot of sense. So we still have more questions. So I think that this, yeah, so people are saying in the comments, it makes a lot of sense. Okay, so there are two questions. I don't know if we really have time to go over this. One is like, I'm a florist. I also want to build a funnel. Are we going to cover that? And I feel like that's where it's like, we've identified the problem. Like building a funnel is like a lot of, that's like a whole separate conversation, in my opinion. I can say like, look at what Tundras are doing, because they obviously are a funnel, like we've talked about, a funnel with no flywheel. So like follow some Tundras, see how they do it.
So I recommend you go, if you are not already subscribed to my Substack, subscribe to it and then become a member, because I have my book, How to Build Your Creative Career, in there, which talks all about how to build a sales funnel. And I also have a post coming out in a couple weeks where I talk about the top of the funnel, the middle of the funnel, and the bottom of the funnel. But basically, the biggest problem, so there's two things. I'll try and do this very quickly. One is almost nobody puts enough people at the top of the funnel to get to the bottom to have any chance of success. Like, let's say there's a 2% close ratio of like people who will actually buy. Well, like if you put 100 people in, that's 2 people. If you put 100,000 people in, that's 2,000 people, I think. Yes. Mm-hmm. So like, you're not putting enough people at the top. They're just waiting for stuff. So like, this is a classic forest and grassland. They're just like, I'm going to keep writing, and then somehow they'll find it eventually. And like, this is why you're like, no, you need to like do actions to like bring people into your universe and then tell them that they can buy things. So, so like part one is you need to have a really clear brand promise of what you're trying to do. And like, so that you can bring people in. Forests also lose a lot of people in their funnel because they're looking for people that don't just love the trope, but love the twist.
Yeah. I think that's the biggest thing for forests is you actually have to do way more marketing than the desert does in terms of a funnel. And I think that's where forests get really stuck is they don't realize, like, that's why I said, you know, to succeed in KU, you've got to be able to hit the whole entire market as hard as you possibly can. Because only like, I don't know, 30% of them, like, whereas a desert would get like if they hit 100,000 people, probably 100,000 or like 80,000 of those people are going to love this book. Versus a forest, you hit 100,000 people, maybe only like 30,000 of them love the book because it's not the center of the market. So, and I think like all the types besides the desert have this issue. Like for the grassland, you are going to have more leaks than the desert would. But like for the forest, especially, it's like, you know, you're only going to find like out of 100 people, only like 20 or 30 of them are going to be like your people who love the trope, who also love, you know, the universal fantasy, the specific universal fantasy that's like your thing. And so you've got to actually hit the market even harder than anybody else does.
Yes. And it needs to, you need to make it clear in your marketing, in your automation sequence. And we have a course in the membership called Build a Super Fandom that I talk about all of this, but it's about like answering the objection and getting them to like, so you need to be able to say, you love fantasy, I love fantasy. You love Portal Fantasy. I love Portal Fantasy. You love strong female characters. I love strong female characters. You love Noble Bright Fantasy. I love Noble Bright Fantasy. You like action adventure. I like action adventure. You love Lord of the Rings. I love Lord of the Rings. But here's the thing about Lord of the Rings. Like, and then that's your twist. And so you have to prove not only, when I say desert has to be like, do you love Lord of the Rings? This is the perfect Lord. It's going to give you every single feel that Lord of the Rings gives you. So many, it's going to give you so many feels. Like you're just going to feel like Lord of the Rings. It's like you're going to want to live in Lord of the Rings. You have to make that extra switch and be like, if you love Lord of the Rings, you will love Lord of the Rings, but also like, what's the deal with with orcs always being the bad guys, huh? Like, what if an orc was the hero? And so, like, whatever that twist is, like, you have to put that into your marketing, and you have to put, like Monica said, a lot more people through. I tend to have more forest tendencies than grassland tendencies, so I can say Monica often messages me about things that I write for my Substack and goes, why would you write that? Like, no one's going to care in the writer community. And I'm like, because they need to hear it. And like Monica's just like, but if you didn't write that, more people would read your publication. And it's like, that's the I think that like that's like the difference between how she thinks and how I think. Like, my goal is to bring people in with a wide trope and then be like, but really it's about capitalism though. Like, yes, you can grow Substack. Here's how the way to grow Substack. But all of that is just to be like, but what I really care about is like showing artists how to survive in a hyper-capitalist hellscape. So like all of the stuff that I do here in a wide audience is just to like bring people into this like twist of like, what if it wasn't you though? What if it was the system? And like, so I have to talk to way more people than a desert, or because like a des would be like, hey, you want to grow your Substack? This is going to be the Substackiest Substack thing you'll ever Substack. Like, you get everything about Substack in here, and I'll Substack your Substack too. And a forest will be like, we'll have that twist, which is why the top needs to be a lot of people, a lot of the right people, not just anyone, but like a lot of like fantasy fans. Because like fantasy fans don't really know like whether they want the trope or they want the subversion of the trope. I don't know. So, and then you have to have a middle of the funnel that optimizes to be like, here's me. I love me. Don't you love me? Like, don't you love this? Don't you love this? Here's why you should love me. Here's this trope. Here's this other thing. And like, by the way, here's this free book. Oh, do you want to try this? I always send like the first chapter out to people when I'm doing like a Kickstarter or something. Because I'm like, well, I have this Kickstarter now for White Rabbit, which is like, what if it was Alice in Wonderland, but like, it was all a drug trip and the drugs were removed. And like, now it's a crime thriller. And it's like, you need to read this chapter before you actually say, like, you need to read this before you actually buy it. But also, I love Alice. I have a post in the page. It's like, why would you do this, you monster? And it's like, I love Alice. She's literally my favorite character of all time. I've read those books hundreds of times. I've had so many copies of those books over the years. My favorite book that I have on my bookshelf is an Alice in Wonderland. That's like really beautiful, that I got in Paris. And so that is the difference between like a forest and a desert, that the funnel needs to be for a desert. If you want this experience, I am going to deliver this exact experience. But a forest has to be, do you love this experience? Well, what if you subverted that experience? And then the bottom and then it's about converting and making each place as optimized as possible, or not. Like, I don't even think about optimizations really at all. I just am like, if a bunch of people go in the top, a bunch of people come at the bottom, I make some money, and like, cool. And if there's any deserts on this call, they're probably like mouth agape, like horrified by I just say that right now. But like, it's true. I mostly care about getting the people doing the actions, and then knowing that if I do X amount of actions, why good things happen. But I've built a robust sales model. I hope that helps. I don't know if that's
it. Yes, it's very helpful. Everybody's saying it's helpful. However, we do need to make this a much shorter answer to this next question. So another Forrest asking, obviously being a forest takes like a long time. They have survived, which I think that's right, to find success. How do you make a living early in your career? Any tips for that?
Yeah, you should do what grasslands do. Just make a long series, like make a series real long, and like make it your shade tree, and then do everything else from that. Like, but the quicker you can actually stand up a shade tree, like the better. But you're not going to do that. You're going to be like, well, I don't want to do that. I want to follow my whims. Like, this is about following my natural tendencies, jerk. Like, that's why you brought me in here. So I will say I have 40 books, and 0 of them are on retailers, because I launched them all on Kickstarter into my membership communities. And like, I don't worry. Like, I'm trying to find somebody who loves all of my work and they support me. I made like $70,000 this year on Kickstarter alone, and I've never put my stuff on retailers. So I think you're going to have to be much more diversified than a Desert will have to do. And because you're probably, like, I made my living at conventions and Kickstarter, and now I have a Substack. So one of those, like, I think you're going to have to lean in. That's why we talked about the natural aptitudes. And then when you find that shade tree, that RJ Blaine series, that's when you double down on it.
Yeah. I think that's the biggest thing is, like, I would say, like, kind of, yes, be a grassland, but, like, I think forests also have the trouble of, like, doubling down on something that isn't really working, just because they like it so much. So I think, like, almost be a desert at first, and, like, again, like, do what a desert would do and find that attention arbitrage, because I think I honestly think that's the forest's best bet, is
or create a new category. Like, I keep going back to RJ because I've known her for so long, and I was there. Like, I remember when it all clicked into place. It was like, what if I did romantic comedies, but they were paranormal, and then also they were cozy mysteries? And, like, what if I took these things and, like, I made it my own thing? And she took 3 popular things and then mixed it with, like, that special RJ magic, and, like, it worked. And so she didn't just make, like, horror fantasy, like, books about potatoes. Like, she picked 3 big genres and mashed them up in her way.
Yes, I agree with that as well. That's definitely a possibility. And I think, like, in some sense, she really did find, like, it's kind of saying the same thing, because she really did find an attention arbitrage before.
Right.
It was because she was taking 3 big things and putting them all together. So I think that's what the person who did the RH curvy, the curvy girl RH did, is, like, those 2 things are popular and, like, both underserved in many ways. And, like, so RJ did, I mean, she was doing, like, almost like a rom-com, or like she was doing comedy before it was popular, right? Like, before it was popular enough, and now it's hotter and it would be harder to break into that. So that's what I would say. I mean, I feel like we already gave the playbook of like, how do you do this? It was in the previous question. So I think the biggest thing that a forest has to do is, like, because you don't, like, if you're a forest, you do not want to hear what we already said, kind of, in many ways. Like you want, like, the thing that is hardest when talking to a forest is they want us in many ways to say, like, oh, just keep doing what you're doing and it'll all work out eventually. And, like, you can do that, but, again, this is a sales and marketing thing, so it's like, you do have to meet the audience. Like, the audience has to be as important to you as the work is, in order to make a commercial success. That's just the rules or the laws of sales and marketing. So so that's what, I don't know, do you want to add anything else?
I think we've talked a lot about aquatics, which I'm not surprised about, because it's probably the most aquatics of, and it's also the most nuanced. Sorry, forest. Let's talk about aquatics, and let's see if there are other questions about forests at the end, because we got a lot more stuff about evolution and such as well that I want to get to. So aquatics. Aquatics are brand managers. They have vision. They are format agnostic. So I have a friend who sat down with me at 20 Books a couple of years ago and was like, I hate writing the books. And I was like, you don't have to write the books. You can hire someone to write the books. Like, go do other stuff. And the next year, she saw me again and sat down with me and she's, I'm buying you lunch because, like, the thing you said, like, meant everything, because I realized I could, what I care about is the overall brand that I have, this big 30. And she's like, I want to have merch, and I want to have RPGs, and I want to have all of these things. And I feel so stifled, because what she wanted to do was go to new formats and new places and infiltrate them, meet the fans where they are, bring them to her, and get them to love her universe. And so that is the big sales and marketing thing. It's, instead of saying, I'm going to find people who love books, they're like, what if I go and find everyone who likes RPGs and bring them into my universe. And then I'll show them books. But I'm using these other formats as a way to grow my overall universe, my overall fan base by doing these things. Nonfiction authors, like so many of them, we didn't talk about this, but like so many of them are aquatics. So like they got a podcast, they got a vodcast, and they got a course, and they got a book, and they got a this, and like they're in tons of formats. But lit RPGs are kind of, they create, like they are just intrinsically a aquatic thing. They're like games plus book, and like they're already multimodal in that way. So like, but the big thing about an aquatic is they're saying, I have a message, or I have a universe, I have a thing that is cool, and I need to go find fans where they are to get them to love this thing. And I'm agnostic to like what like where I'm going, as long as the fans are there. So they're great at Kickstarter, Patreon, live events, Ream, Wide, everywhere that they can gather more people, even if it's a small amount of people. They are loyal to their world. They almost always have one world. Think about like George Lucas. He's a classic aquatic. He put out a book and then was like, cool, that's great. I'm going to do merch though now. And that's how he made all of his money. And then he's like, cool, this is good. I did visual effects. I'm going to now make a visual effects company now, so I can just get other people to do this thing. And like they were expanding their business by opening new formats. They are literally making a trend from scratch. This is why aquatics take so long, because they are basically building Star Wars from the ground up. And the hardest thing about aquatics is it's real expensive. Like books are very cheap to make. As someone who's made almost all the other formats that we talked about, books are very reasonably priced to make as compared to every other format, especially when you start getting into movies and video games and such. So the thing that stops an aquatic most is that they need to focus on opening one line of business, put all of their focus onto it, and then hire somebody to do that stuff and keep it going so they can move on to the next thing and the next thing and the next thing. And so if you have like, these are perfect like biz dev people, if you guys do like know anything about like entrepreneurship, but like they're spinning up new lines. Every one of these new things is basically a new line of business that's meant to funnel people into the universe and get them to like all of their things. For that reason, aquatics have the highest super fan to subscriber ratio of any universe of any of these ecosystems, because they're spending the amount of time it takes to get that person in and make them a fan is so long. They're spending so much time. They're offering them so many different access points that by the time they're a fan, like they are all in on the universe. This is how someone with like 200 or 300 people on their email list could make $10,000 on Kickstarter, because those 200 people are not just fans, not just casual readers. They are like all in on everything. Like they're going to come to your to do a book event with you. They're going to go ride horses with you. Like they're going to do literally anything because they love the universe and you and what you're building so much that so if you're ever wondering like how somebody could make this, it seems to be that is the aquatic methodology. Is they have, so everyone who comes into their universe and stays is a super fan, not a casual fan. All right. Sure, we have less questions about aquatics than forests, but anything to add about aquatics?
I mean, there are no comments on aquatics. I feel, oh wait, there is one comment. Major, so, and this is a question that maybe kind of fits in with aquatics. So somebody asked, in what ecosystem would you place a series such as Dungeons and Dragons, Battletech, or Star Wars? So we've already talked about Star Wars. We believe George Lucas is a textbook aquatic, basically. I do think what somebody said in the comments is, it was Nick again. He was saying, these are brands, not ecosystems, right? Like the ecosystem is the archetype.
The archetype is the ecosystem. So you're an aquatic ecosystem. The brand is Star Wars, or, I mean, I feel like Gary Gygax was like a grassland, but like Luke Gygax is an aquatic, because like it didn't seem like Gary Gygax in any of the things that I've read or seen of him like really cared about expansion beyond D&D. But like there's no doubt that now D&D is an aquatic brand, and like
Right.
most of the time corporations are aquatics because they want to expand
They,
into so many
yeah,
things.
they have to be. I mean, yeah, I would say like, okay, so somebody asked about WMG Publishing, which I believe is Michael Anderle's publishing arm. We believe that Michael Anderle is probably a desert, just because of the way, if you look at his success and like his success at bringing other authors on board, and building out like a huge publishing company, he's probably,
Yes.
he's basically a desert, like deserts. And so is like James Patterson, and Dakota Kraut, is another good example. But it's like somebody who like a desert should build a publishing company when they like own the genre essentially.
Yes.
Like they own their genre, and then a lot of times when you talk to them, the reason they're building that publishing company is because they want to then get into licensing. But getting into licensing is a little bit different than wanting to like make the comics yourself or make the movies yourself. So you see like James Patterson, for example, like he still loves like writing books and like being a co-author on all these books. Like that's his main work.
Yes.
And he's like licensing all that out to people who are good at that in other areas, where I feel like George Lucas was very hands-on. I think Stephanie Meyer's another good example of somebody who like, she was so hands-on with like the Twilight movies. So she's the author of the Twilight Saga. She's super, super hands-on with like the storyline. She was vetoing stuff for like the graphic novel, where the graphic novelist was just like, I mean, she's kind of like difficult to work with, I'm sure, because the graphic novel person was like she had just like vetoed so many things because she's like, my audience is not going to like that. Like my fans are not going to like that. And I think it's just a different energy.
Yeah, so I think that the good example of like a publishing company, so like Michael Anderle,
Yep.
like he expanded his books to more books. Like an aquatic expands their books to other formats, and that they have success doing that. Whereas like Michael Anderle is so successful at bringing people into his publishing company because he's like, I know what the trends are. Just write this book to trend. Can you write this book to trend? And he can even bring people to the trend because he's writing with them, as opposed to a Forrest who can't quite do that. But yes, like the difference between like a publishing company, like James Hunter is another one. I think he's probably a desert, even though he's in lit RPG, because he wanted to just make more books. Like Gary Gygax wanted to expand through more RPGs, not through 500 other formats. As far as I know, that was, I mean, the thing also is once you are successful, at some point you will become an aquatic, because like you have to be to expand your brand into more things. Like Neil Gaiman is a classic forest, but like he also writes in every other format because
Right.
like A, people are paying him to do it, and B, he wants to find people in all of these other modalities. So the goal, it's really important to remember that the goal of this is that you inhabit all of them. You have a base one and you are bringing in things that make your base stronger, but everyone, this isn't Clifton strengths, this isn't Enneagrams, like this is about how you start from one thing and expand to your business into having all of the things, or expand to hire people that are that have all of those
Right.
pieces.
Yeah, I mean, I would say like it's I think like a grassland is going to take from an aquatic something different than a forest would.
Right.
So I think like it's not that you want to evolve into being an aquatic, it's that you want to evolve and like take some things from the aquatic that will work best for your type. So I mean, I wouldn't say Neil Gaiman is working in new formats, but like at the end of the day, he's still mostly an author, I feel like.
Right.
And he just has like, same with George R. R. Martin. Like he's a grassland still. He is working in television and a bunch of other stuff, but he's still basically a grassland and basically an author. I just think like once you kind of get to a certain level, you have lots of opportunity to be in other formats. But I don't know that it changes your base. So so a question about the aquatic. If you are an aquatic, you don't have a lot of money early on, should you so the person asked, like, I think the question is more like, what should you do? The
Okay,
person,
so
yeah, the person asked if you should barter with other creatives. I don't think you should. I don't really, I don't
so
know.
aquatics are a highly partnership-based ecosystem because they need other people who are very excited about their universe in different formats to function. So I don't know about bartering, because bartering is like, I don't know, you write a book for them and they like
Right.
what I did earlier this year was like, hey, you do good card games. Do you want to do an Ichabod card game? Like, I think that is a partnership that like can be effective, or a RPG, someone who already exists in another world and wants IP, and you have a world that is working, like you can partner with them that way. The biggest thing I would say is you have to get one line of business up and running and sustainable before you move on to another business. I'm sorry, this is like me saying that I killed your cat to any aquatic who's out there, but like, it is true. You must have a business that's either be able to hire other people somehow, but really you must have a line of business that is sustainable and profitable, and then you can move on to the next unprofitable thing and build that up and spin that up and move on to the next and the next, and each time leaving somebody behind who can run that other business like you. But like, the most successful people, like George Lucas, focused mostly on merchandise and his movie for the first several years. Like, he mostly focused on those Star Wars toys, and then he like built a virtual effects studio, and then he did books, and then he did all of that stuff. So like, he didn't put 500 things out, and he's like the most aquatic of all time. So I would say like, you have to chill and make sure your one thing works and is sustainable before you move on to the next thing, unless you have, I don't know, a ton of additional money, and then you're probably just going to burn through it.
Right. Yeah, so like a great example in the author community, somebody who has confirmed that they are an aquatic, is Amelia Rose from so she's a co-founder of Ream. So it's funny because she did start a software company in addition to being an author. But like yeah, like she stuck with her subscription for years and years before she even like turned stuff into books. And now she's like doing comics, she's doing audio, like see me audio, so she's definitely in a lot of formats. But I do think she stuck to her subscription and got like spun it up. And then she got her books on retailers and spun that up so that she has a stable stable revenue in her business. And so that's how she's able to afford to do like the comics that she did, that she's currently doing. And it's a very slow process, her comics. She's still on like the first one. I think she just launched her Kickstarter for it. But I mean, she's really kind of like taking her time with each thing. And I think that that's very important for an aquatic, is like, do what you can. But if you actually want to make money at this, then like double down. And I think like, I think like crowdfunding is like the place that aquatics should be in publishing. Like, either start doing a lot of Kickstarters or start doing a subscription, or do both. Like, those are the things that an aquatic does very, very well. And like, you'll get a higher response from fans, and they pay more than they would for like a book on a retailer. And so it's a way to like kind of build your money faster, and then very carefully take it and like be very disciplined and start to expand to new formats.
I mean, in the same way that a forest has multiple series that they're all growing probably slowly, and aquatic has different formats that they're growing very slowly. So like, in that way, there's a lot of overlap in how you should think. Like, you need a shade tree, or whatever we call it in aquatic. You need something to like splinter out to these formats and make people love it as well. Okay. Any others?
We have a number of like very general questions. I
All
guess
right,
we
let
could
me
do,
get to the end of
yeah,
this and then we
go to the
can.
end.
All right,
Yeah.
I'm just
And
going to
then
go
we'll
to
answer.
the rest of these slides. So, how each ecosystem uses trends. Deserts ride the trend. That's 100%. They're 100% in or 98% in the trend. Grasslands weave trends. They're about 90% to trend. They're keeping things pretty on trend, but they're weaving it into their series or their topic. Tundras stack evergreen trends. So they focus less on what is hot now, almost not what is hot now at all. They're looking at like, how can I bring vampire, shifter, werewolf, dragon, paranormal, steamy, whatever that they're like, how can I make all of these things relevant? So they're all going to come back around. And that's how I think as well. It's like, I don't care about what's happening now. I just care about what the evergreen tropes are that I can ride forever. Forests twist the trend. They see something in the market and they're like, what if though? What if this though? But then, and then aquatics basically make a trend from scratch. So of these, it's like 190, I don't know, probably like 50 and then 80 and then 0 because they're making it from scratch. Like, I mean, they're doing something with trend. Like Amelia wrote her book to trend, but like they're also basically making their own trend. Like they want Star Wars to be the trend.
Right. And she was definitely doing subscriptions before like really anybody was doing subscriptions.
Yep.
Yeah.
All right. Cool. All right. So step 1 is to get healthy. Step 2 is evolve. So evolution. These are the 5 stages of evolution. This is of all of the things that we've talked about, the thing that people always ask me, especially when at the beginning of their career. So there are 5 stages. Step 1 is they're doing things and there's no focus at all. They're just like trying this here, they're trying this there, trying this there. Everyone who starts in this business does a bunch of things with no focus. Stage 2, they are focusing on the wrong things. So maybe they're a forest, but they're trying to ride trends in KU, the wrong things. Stage 3, they are focusing on the right things, at least one right thing. They see, wow, I'm doing this thing and I'm able to hit profitability. So probably the other 2, like you're not profitable. Probably at 3, you're like close or like kissing profitability, but you're also probably doing a bunch of the wrong things as well that are taking your attention away from doing the right things. Stage 4 is you're thriving, but you're running into income caps. So for instance, you're in KU and you just can't hit above 20,000. Like a friend of mine was like, I would give Facebook more money if they took it, but they just won't take my money. And so they're running into income caps. And that's when you really need to start evolving past your natural ecosystem to bring in the other ecosystems. Every business does this with multiple lines of business, and they are acquiring things or like selling things, whatever the thing is, like they end up making these partnerships for other ways to do stuff. And that's how so you're really only evolving in the 5th stage. Everything else is getting yourself to a place where you are humming along and you have predictable income. And then you're bringing other pieces into this. As I said, after stabilizing your income, you start to bring in the elements of the other ecosystems. All successful authors are going to evolve out because they are going to cap out. You cap out at your own ecosystem's growth. It happens to every business. You have to evolve beyond your base ecosystem eventually to make your business work. So it does not mean, though, abandoning your base system. Evolution helps supercharge your ecosystem with the superpowers of another ecosystem. So I am a tundra. I capped out at my tundradness. I started incorporating forest things, and that worked pretty well. Then I started incorporating really what worked well was grassland things by like with my Substack and then having these long series and then making the brand promise. Once I had the brand promise, I just started making that brand promise and I expanded the series out. Then we worked in card games and coffee and other formats. I started licensing stuff. And then I started being like, I should probably optimize this thing. So we're like, yours is going to look different. This is where at the beginning I said everyone has a different like way that they make this successful, but that's what I mean by like taking things and supercharging them. Maybe it's not even to grow past what you're making now, but it is to make things more stable and make your income more stable because more things work. Okay, so then people are like, great, I'm a 4. How do I evolve? So most ecosystems, forests, aquatics, and grasslands, because they are a flywheel, should evolve first into a tundra, because then they will have more big income hits, probably have more stable income. Or aquatic, they don't have a stable income and they need infusion of cash to build a stable income. In the same way as tundra should probably evolve into a grassland or a forest, depending on whether they love a topic or a theme, a universal fantasy or a topic more. Then a desert always wants to evolve into an aquatic, but aquatics are like the most expensive ecosystem probably to maintain.
Right.
And so they should probably evolve into a grassland because they understand grassland. They're both data heavy. So I say this again, I know you want to evolve into an aquatic. It seems really cool. You probably do not have the funds to do that, but you could with very little effort. Still, you can use a lot of what you learned on a desert to become a very successful grassland. And this is the big thing that we learned. This was our big mistake. Tundras are flywheels without a funnel. Grasslands and forests and aquatics are flywheels without a funnel. But that's only 60% of the market. The 40% of the market doesn't do this. They should not evolve to any of the things we just talked about. Like, they should be evolving into grasslands. And so we talked to deserts as if they should evolve into either they're probably a sales funnel. Like, if I had to pick a sales funnel or a flywheel.
I think they're a sales funnel.
Yeah,
Deserts are absolutely a sales funnel with no flywheel.
So they're a sales funnel. They need a grassland flywheel probably because they're both so data heavy. All they have to do is start looking further into the future than they are now and build a series that weaves trends instead of rides them. And they can have a very spot, like, no idea that like 40% of the audience, or like we think 40%, like we just like completely tuned them out, and they tuned us out because like we literally weren't speaking their language. And so this is the big mistake the entire industry. I told you at the beginning I was going to come around and fix every problem in the industry. The big problem is that deserts and forests are yelling at each other to do the thing that the other one should do, but the other person shouldn't be doing it. Like, deserts should silo pen names because they write different brand experiences depending on the genre and the trend. Forests should have one pen name because they can put everything under, because they're doing the same brand experience. And then the other 20% are off trying to make sense of why none of the other two things work for them. But like aquatics can probably do a lot of the forest stuff and it works a little bit, but not really as well as they want it to. A tundra probably is like, well, I need a community somehow, and they figure out something to work on. But like either one, like if you are in that and they're in that 20%, you probably have figured out a way to at least somewhat make a life work for you. But you would be much more successful if you focused on your own ecosystem and then built out that and doubled down on that first and then built out. But the next time you have an argument with someone in the community, ask them what their ecosystem is. If they do not know their ecosystem, send them in taking the quiz, or just tell them, oh, you're probably a desert or you're probably a forest. And the reason why you say that you should silo pen names is because that works for you, and it doesn't work for me because I make the same brand experience across all of my books. We were at NINC, we were at the pre-NINC, the post-NINC. This single thing, this whole thing is like 90% of arguments in this industry. Once you see it, you can't unsee it. Go look at the 20 books group, the Wide for the Win group, like all of the things when people are sniping back and forth about each other, it's almost always about something that deals with their base ecosystem, and they're telling someone else. It's so easy if you use Kickstarter because I'm a tundra. So my big mistake was I'm a tundra. Why can't everyone should use Kickstarter? And like that didn't turn out to be true. Like some people should use Kickstarter, but if you have read my article on the author ecosystem Substack, in very different ways, and maybe deserts shouldn't be using Kickstarter for a while. And so that is the big mistake. That is how you can fix it, by just knowing your ecosystem. Oh, it was so nice in like Friday and Saturday when after I did this thing and people knew their ecosystem, people started saying, are you a forest or a desert? And like, oh, are you a desert? And like people started having this shared language where they can say, oh, and this is really helpful for everyone out there, because if you know that Michael Anderle is a desert and you don't have the energy for desert energy, or you don't have the time for desert energy right now, you can just be like, Michael Anderle, you're amazing, but like, this is not where I'm at in my career. I need to go get some forest energy right now. Or I need to, and this is what I do whenever I wake up. I go, I need to embrace my inner forest or my inner whatever that day. And it's really helpful. When I try to expand out, I see things like Steve Piper's course. It looks great. It is pure desert energy. I just do not have the energy for it at this moment. Like, so you can start thinking about that, and it will hopefully be very helpful for you. And you can stop, you can just, and even if they don't know what an ecosystem is, if you just like, are you a desert? It will just stop them sniping at you like right away, because they'll just be very confused. Okay, so use cases. I showed you a bunch of the use cases: solo, co-writing, or shared world, or anthology. Well, a lot of shared worlds are run by forests, and they don't work because like forests can't judge trends. Probably every shared world should be run by deserts and grasslands, because like a desert can write to trend without like causing a big stink. They are not going to send in a book that like completely destroys everyone else's book, and a grassland's going to be able to properly judge the trend. Any y'all in box sets that like made list runs? Well, I'd be really interested to see the ones that failed if they were full of deserts. Because like, I know after analyzing who was in my box set list run that worked, well, we had a bunch of tundras and we had a bunch of aquatics, and like you had me as a tundra telling everyone else how to launch. And shockingly, we hit pretty high on the USA list comparatively. So like probably you need at least a tundra and an aquatic to like really take advantage of it, because there were a bunch of aquatics in our one that's like, here's this like book trailer, and here's this other thing, and like here's this game. Like all of these things were happening behind the scenes, because we had different ecosystems all working together. And I was lying. I was just kidding about the shared world, because you do need all the ecosystems to make them really work well.
I mean,
but like we talked about,
it is true. Like the forests are like the most excited about the shared world. And yeah, it's tough. You really want to get like a desert consulting you on that, or a grassland.
Yeah, I mean, and the name of ours was Once Upon a Rebel Fairy Tale, and it was all paranormal fairy tales. And I was like, oh, of course that worked, because like we had it right at the beginning, because like fairy tale is one of the two big tropes in like a big genre, and then there were the right ecosystems inside of it. We talked a little bit about publishing slate. Let's talk about building a team. I have done some consulting work with my friends' businesses and just talked to them about how their marketing and sales team works. And all of their marketing and sales teams are all jacked up. So what should you do with a small team? Well, you probably want your social media or optimization or ad team to be run by a desert, because they actually like the game of getting ad costs low. You probably want your research, your content marketing, your thought leadership teams to be grasslands, because they're going to be going deep for years on the same topic. You want your launch team to be at least run by a tundra, because they're going to know how to build excitement. You want your business development to be run by an aquatic, because they're intrinsically going to know about building out and developing new lines of business. And you want your community team to be probably run by a forest. Now, is that 100%? No, but like this is how you should start thinking about your own teams, whether you're building. So a lot of VAs are forests because they are built to like often take over communities. That's what they're good at. And then people are like, oh, you could just run my TikTok account. And it's like, oh, no, honey, no, you shouldn't. That's not good. Like,
Yeah.
that's
Higher
probably not
desert.
good.
Yeah.
So like you want to make sure you're hiring your Slammin' community team and then a different Slammin' social media manager, optimization ad person. Like I run ads for clients and like I hate every minute of it. So like I'm sure they're not perfectly optimized because the minute I'm like, I'm happy with that number, I can't anymore. So like, but there are people who are like, let me tell you about how to optimize this thing by doing a
Yeah.
reverse turnaround, retarget,
Right.
like, and you're like,
I'm just like,
I'm not going to set that up though. And
I
so
know. I
like,
just tuned that out
yes, you want
as
someone's
like a
natural
non-desert.
tendencies to be in the right position. So if you are a forest, you can hire other people to do the work for you. Okay, so the 3 takeaways. Sales and marketing is complicated and nothing works for everyone. Everything is nuance. The author ecosystem can give you a lens for what worked for you. It is only a lens for which to see your marketing and sales and your growth in general. Like it is not even really a personality test. It runs on the axis of sales and marketing. Like it works in tandem, in congress with Clifton strengths and Enneagrams and whatever the thing is. Like it really is how you can see the sales and marketing and the authorship and the indie author world especially, and say in this complicated, chaotic world, oh, I should focus on this. Or like, yes, that sounds great. That's a desert strategy. Or like, that's a forest strategy. So heck no. And then once your ecosystem is healthy, evolution can open up even more opportunities for you, or building out a team or building a publishing company. You can join. We're doing this much more depth in January. You can join us in the Author Ecosystem Live. You can take the quiz at authorecosystem.com. We have 3 Substacks. I highly recommend you join all 3 of them if you're not already.
I'm going to say them out loud. So the quiz is at authorecosystem.com. The live course that we're doing in January is at authorecosystem.com/live. So you can sign up for it there. The Substacks are authorEcosystems.substack.com, authorstack.substack.com, that is Russell's, and then authoranalyst.substack.com, that is mine. That's just for the podcast listeners.
Sure. Yes. I mean, if you want to learn about tundras, I've written like 3 books as a tundra. And before I even knew I was a tundra, about tundra stuff and sales funnels and building audiences and all of that stuff, just free for members on my Substack. And we just did every month I do a different platform and how to have success in it. Eventually I'm going to run out. Like I'm sure Monica will do like Barnes and Noble for each ecosystem or whatever, but like I'm gonna cap out eventually. So far I've done Substack and Kickstarter and email marketing, and those ones are free on our Author Ecosystem Substack. Before we get out of here, I'm sure there are just a bunch of final general questions, but at least I am done with the actual. If you're like, I don't want any of these questions, that's one at the end, like it's over now, except for questions.
Yeah, we do. I mean, we have a number of questions, and like there's so much more we could say about this. I mean, I think the biggest thing I would say is like we obviously we can't contain this presentation or this system to less than 2 hours, just in a simple conversation that we're having. And you know, this presentation, you did it at NINC, it was like an hour, but I think you skipped, you were able to skip like quite a bit of it. So obviously this is a really big conversation. I really, really recommend coming to the Author Ecosystems Live course. We're like, it may be the only time we teach it even, or at least like so generally. So definitely come to that. It's at authorecosystem.com/live. And if you're coming to some of our other stuff, you might already have it. Or somebody asked a question via email. They said, I was on the web call earlier, had to drop. Can you differentiate the difference between the $300 Author Ecosystem coaching and the $1,000 package? And just said that they're trying to decide which one to join. So the $1,000 one gives you the author ecosystems live calls that are coming up in January, and it also gives you Go Wide, Grow Wide, Kickstarter Accelerator, and Direct Sales Accelerator. So if you have like specific questions, yeah, go ahead.
And also that Build a Super Fandom course that I talked about. We've got a Facebook ads course. There's a bunch of other courses. If you are joining us in New Orleans, you also have it. So anyone who joins us in New Orleans also gets access to all of that. So the live calls is just author ecosystem specific. So like if you want to know how to build, like where to focus, if you want to actually then implement it, like the courses will help you implement everything, because we have courses on just about everything, every platform that you could possibly imagine. Nope, that's not true. I'm not going to make that promise. I take it back. On a lot of platforms.
More platforms than anybody else that we know. We've studied like a lot of platforms. I think we have a great set of books too. So the Book Sales Supercharge series, if you're like trying to figure stuff out, then that's a great set of books. If you're trying to figure out launching specifically, like Russell's like literally one of the best launchers I know on the planet, like that I know personally on the planet. And more on the direct sales side, not as much on the retailer side. But we kind of gave you some examples. I mean, I think one of the best things you can do is follow a person who is the type and see what they do, and kind of if they have, and like most people don't, most people don't have courses, they don't have books. So like it's kind of a gift when someone does, because you can actually read that and understand the way they think about things, and just kind of absorb some of their energy. So yeah, I think we have a great set of books and courses and content as well. So just like kind of stick around is kind of like what I would say about that. If you have questions about sales and marketing that are specific to platforms or specific to like kind of closing a gap on your type, or the other thing is we both offer consulting. So if you want to talk to us one-on-one about your ecosystem and like what you should do next, that's probably a stronger forum for that.
And you can get there at writermba.com/Russell or writermba.com/Monica. But I mean, yeah, I'm happy to answer a couple more questions. I'm pretty tired right now, but
you covered a bunch of the questions in the ending. So somebody asked, what do you think of the new Patreon shop feature as an early adoption strategy for someone entering direct sales? And this person said they have Kickstarter success as well. This is not super related to ecosystems.
Yeah,
but
I mean, I think that general. It's fine. Like, look, there's so many things. I worry about Patreon because you don't own the payment data. So I know a lot of people who had success on Patreon and then now are trying to go to Substack or Ream or somewhere else, and they just can't close their Patreon down because they don't own the payment data, the payment gateway. They don't connect to Stripe. So, but like, hey man, if you're doing Royal Road or Wattpad that has like an integration into Patreon, like it's great. If you have a shop feature already, I tend to think you should probably like just suck it up and do Gumroad or like PayHip or something for your store and put it on your website. But I'm also not confident that like that is what people want. That I know that authors want to be able to offer it. There's nothing that has ever told me that fans actually want that thing, and they're just like, oh, I can't go to your website to like get it. I need it on Patreon to happen. So like, just like with like Buy Me a Coffee, they like have both. Ko-fi.com has like both options. Like, I think it's good to have both options, but I tend to think that like a platform that's great for subscriptions is probably not great for any of the other things. For instance, Kickstarter, that I love, Monica. I love Kickstarter. You know how much I love Kickstarter. They had a subscription platform called Drop or Drip or something. That was the worst experience I've ever had in subscriptions. And like, it was just chaos. And they canceled it like a couple months later after I had just like dropped, like I had done it. So yeah, I mean, I don't necessarily think that a place that is great for subscriptions is immediately going to be great for a web store, or that someone's going to easily be able to search. Like they can just go to your website /shop or /buy. if you're asking if you can have that besides your own store shop, I would say you probably want your own website, at least to just protect your name so that people, when search it, have a place to go.
Yeah, I mean, this like summarizes pretty much everything that I think about it. In the authors, so the thing I'll add, so I agree with like literally everything that Russell just said. I think it's a solution that Patreon would like to, Patreon wants to keep people around, so they're trying to be direct sales now and expand into direct sales. I'm not really convinced that they should. I'll also add though that I just, as far as like Patreon, even for subscriptions for authors, I don't think that their new features are strong enough to serve authors. I still think that Ream is like the better option if you're doing fiction, and Substack is the better option if you're doing nonfiction. And I just see people like kind of like at least in the author space, kind of like mass exodus from Patreon. It does have some cool integrations, and like if you're doing lit RPG, like they're all at Patreon still, because it connects to Royal Road, so like why wouldn't you be? But like I see like in other genres, and I think lit RPG will get there, a lot of them are just moving to Ream because it's built for like books, not built for like YouTube videos and music, and like it's not a generalized platform.
Right. They built it with like growth in mind, whereas I'm not sure that Patreon can say the same thing. Like they built it to, like, they have a bigger vision than the thing they had from the beginning, whereas Patreon seems to have had the same vision from the beginning and is now trying to, and that's important, not to get really technical, but on an architectural standpoint, as like when you're building an interface, like if you already know you're going to build out all of these other features, you design the platform with all of the features able to be worked in, instead of like backdooring a fix over here that you didn't intend to use before. Yeah. Anyway, that's way too technical. Anything else?
So that was so earlier we were talking about Mike Landerley's company, but WMG is actually Dean Wesley Smith and Kristen Catherine Rush's company, which I just made a mistake on. And so yeah, people were asking about DWS. So I think KKR is probably a grassland, almost definitely a grassland, just in my observation. I don't know about DWS. I would guess like maybe a forest. I don't know.
Yeah. He has some forest. He has some
forest energy. Yeah, forest energy.
He's definitely got like a personality that is unique to him.
Right. It's like if you're a fan of him, like, and I think that's like the easiest way to distinguish. It's like if you're a fan of DWS, like you're a fan of DWS. You're not a fan of like, I can't even think of the genre he writes because I don't know. He writes like all of them. So like that's just kind of a clear sign of a forest to me. With KKR, it's, like her blog has been going on for like a millennium, it feels like like a weekly blog. Like she's just a very consistent like writer who doesn't necessarily have one breakout really. I think she just has like the biggest catalog ever from writing for like 50 plus years. So
I do wonder if Dean Wesley Smith is a tundra, because he definitely seems like he's like, I launched it, it's done, now I'm gonna go to the next thing, and then it's done. Yeah. So like, I don't know.
I agree with that. He's done he's done some bigger campaigns on Kickstarter, but they also, I mean, they have like 1 million person plus email list. So like you kind of should be able to do well on Kickstarter with that many, like you should be able to do well at anything with that many people on your list. Okay. So then another question, Clifton strengths are there any, so this was about Clifton strengths, but it could really be about any personality test or quiz or archetyping system. What are commonalities with the author ecosystems?
I tried. I was trying to fit square pegs in round holes all through NINC, trying to be like, is it a love language thing? Is it a Clifton strengths thing? Is it an Enneagram thing? There just doesn't seem to be any overlay. So what Becca told us when she came into our membership was that people people, all personality based things are around one axis, and it just like the sales and marketing axis that we develop doesn't seem to, I mean, don't think Enneagrams and like Clifton strings seem to like really pair up that nicely either. So I would love someone else to tell me that it's different, but I really, especially with the love languages, I was like, maybe I'm a Tundra, and my thing's gift giving. Is like that a thing? And everyone else who was a Tundra was like, nope, not a thing. And then I was like, Monica, and like Monica's like acts of service. That seems like it would be a grassland thing. And again, it was like, nope, there was no consistent rhyme or reason to what they tended to want to do.
Yeah, I mean, I think the biggest thing is that it's, like when I think of the like axes or like the spectrums that this particular system measures, one is like trends, which you saw, like Russell did, like the trend writing, trend setting, trend weaving, trend twisting, like and so that's like one. Fans are one. So like a lot of the spectrums that we have are focused on marketing and sales concepts. And I think that is why, we've even looked at, I mean, one of the reasons and one of the people that did inspire us in some ways is Becca, because she has her own archetyping system, authors, I think it's called Author Success Archetypes. And she's talked about it. She hasn't really launched it yet. She's still collecting data on it, I think. But, she talked about, what was it? The islands, evergreens, drafters, and
Trailblazers.
What are you? Trailblazers. Yeah. So she talked about that, and we were originally trying to use some of that framework to even understand like the discrepancies in our data. And it just like, we couldn't get it to fit, because like we would have happily just used like a different system if we could, but we just couldn't get anything to fit the data set that we had. So like we basically, it's like when you're in statistics or whatever, you're just looking for like a curve that can fit the data and describe the data well. Like that's what statistics is at its core. And so like we just couldn't find like an archetyping system that fit our data, and so we had to create one.
We tried so hard.
We did
so hard for like in fact,
like 6 months we were looking at like, all sorts of stuff.
Basically, it was in April, we were like, we can't fit this to like anything else that we have seen in a way that like makes sense for the data. And like, I love Becca's system, like the Trailblazer, like it like explains so many things. Right. But I was even like, oh, maybe evergreens are forests, and it's like, nope, that's not a thing. Like they're a lot of evergreens are like deserts, and like, so you're like, so we don't know. Like I don't think that I think that it is, what I have learned about these kind of systems is the more of them that you can layer on top of each other, the better you can know yourself and know like your own strengths and know why you do certain things. And then what you measure, you manage, you can improve the things. But I think that like, I mean, I don't know how Myers-Briggs overlaps to any of the stuff. It's just, I think that you just like have that Venn diagram intersectionality between all of the stuff, and like this is just another lens where you can say, oh, I'm an 8 that like is a high strategic, and I'm a grassland. Like, how do I make all of this fit together? And it is as much about the thing that Monica said that I can't remember, but I know I agreed with, as it is like lining all of these lenses up together, kind of like you're in an optometrist and be like, oh, I see the vision now. And like you might have 3 lenses on it. It might be mostly clear, and then you put another lens on and you're like, oh, I get it.
Yeah, I think a lot of it is just self-knowledge, just in general helps you. So yeah, I would say, I mean, there may be trends, like I know like Enneagram Clifton, people try to find some trends, like probably if you were high in control, for example, you probably are also like like there's a good chance you could be an Enneagram 8, or if you're an Enneagram 8, you may have control. Or was it control? I don't
Yeah,
know.
I have control.
Or
That's
command. Sorry,
command.
command.
Yes,
That's the one but I mean, it's,
that's
yeah,
my number one. So
right. Like those are kind of, there's a commonality there, but like, or like you have high achiever if you're an Enneagram 3, like, um, so anyway, yeah, it's definitely something I want to sit down and like unpack more, but we just haven't. That's pretty much all the questions. I mean, somebody said like Ream versus Substack. I don't know
okay,
if
so I
we
do have
want
a
to talk about
thing.
that.
I will say a thing because I have a big post coming about it. If you're seriously, if you're not on my Substack, it's like I got a thing coming out about the two main different kinds of models. Patreon is an association model. Monica and I are, this is not a Monica and Russell approved thing. This is a Russell approved thing. Monica has modifications that she has already told me that she wants to make to it. But the idea is associations are about belonging, and Patreon is great for belonging because they offer a bunch of tiers, and it's like choose how much you want to belong and how deep your commitment is, in the same way that like association fees do. And they're really about like, I'm team whatever, Amelia. And Ream is the same way. Substack is really much more a publication model, like the Washington Post. Like no one is saying, oh, like I'm a Washington Post subscriber and that's part of my identity. So like why that's important is Substack, Ream and Patreon are mostly about containing what you already have and like building the community stronger. Substack is about organic reach. So like I get hundreds of subscribers every month because I just exist on the platform in a way that like facilitates growth. So they're about, a publication grows by spreading to other people. So it's not it's you, and you can have both. Monica has a Ream and she has a Substack. Like you can do, I see the subscription for authors, people like Christopher Hopper putting all the stuff into all of the work that they do for the high ends, and I'm just like, nope, cannot, do not, will not ever. Like unless I can hire someone to do it. So if you are looking for organic reach and you are okay with getting like quantity, because that's why they only have one tier. I guess you have two with the founding member, but you only have one tier. So you must get quantity of humans. Then you would go with Substack. In fact, if you're looking for like growth or something, you probably want to be on Substack. It may be the best platform of any platform to find like organic growth, like, and then be able to bring them to your mailing list, because that's the goal, especially if you're in nonfiction. If you're looking to get something where you can maximize the monetary value of your fan base, then Patreon is what I would choose, because like you can't even, or Ream, because it's like not even very searchable on either of those platforms. So you really have to bring all the boys to the yard on those platforms, and you can like get help on Patreon. But the axis is like you're giving up a million different tiers for the one, in order to get access to that organic reach, which works for me. But I know a lot of people who have you need consistency in all of those things for the organic reach to really work. And it's really a platform for grasslands. Like really.
All right, so thank you so much for coming. I know we had a bunch more comments, and so I apologize we couldn't say them all out loud and chat more about that. We kind of just pulled the questions, but obviously we had a lot of content to get through, and I think the focus on the author ecosystems was kind of what people were here for as well. So yeah, do you have anything? Go ahead.
Yeah, I saw a question about my book, How to Build Your Creative Career, covers the basics of sales. Someone asked, do you have one nonfiction book that cover funnels too? That's the one that I would pick. It is available on platforms, but you get it for free if you were a member of my Substack. So you have all of my nonfiction for for free. And I talk about funnels in that book. So you would just, there's a thing that says nonfiction. You would just click on that and it says nonfiction available on this publication. And it's how to build your creative career. And I believe it's section 2 and 3 that deals with funnels.
Yeah, and those books are really, I would say, like, just read, like, if you're trying to build a sales funnel, just read all 3 of Russell's books. Like, they're short enough. Because you have a 3rd book out. I don't know if it's on your Substack, but it's gotta be somewhere. Oh, it's a secret one. Okay,
it's secret on my. If you go to my become a successful author, then you can see that this is not a book. It's mostly just musings about stuff.
Go deeper into Russell's sales funnel.
There are just so many of these. So many comments. This is easily the most comments I've ever seen.
Yeah, we got a lot of comments. So thank you to everybody for the comments, and thank you for sticking around like 2 hours and 40 minutes later. Yes. That's awesome. So we will put this up for recording.
Yes, awesome. Bye everyone.
Bye.
Try to make sure that it like does the thing and closes out the should. I'm so worried that it's going to not record the end, but we're just going to, fingers crossed that you should all get an email for it in about 2 hours.
It says that it's still recording, so.
Yes. All right. Bye.